Manhattan, Upper East Side, 11:47 p.m. Madison Harper had exactly 5 seconds before the security guards discovered she wasn't the new night-cleaning lady for the penthouse. 5 seconds to find a hiding spot in the most exclusive apartment building in New York City. 4. The hallway stretched before her like a private museum, oil paintings worth more than her entire student loan debt, marble sculptures she'd only seen in art history textbooks. 3. Male voices echoed from the elevator shaft. Darn it, they were ascending faster than she'd calculated. 2 doors ahead. Guest powder room or a master bedroom with the door slightly cracked, smooth classical music floating through the gap. 1. Madison pushed through the bedroom door and slipped inside, her pulse racing like a hummingbird's wings. 0. That's when 3 realizations hit her simultaneously. First, the room carried the scent of sandalwood and something unmistakably masculine that made her stomach perform aerial acrobatics. Second, a man occupied the king-size bed, MacBook balanced on his lap, tortoise-shell glasses perched on his nose as he regarded her with the expression of someone witnessing a UFO landing on his terrace. Third, this man was Ethan Cross, the Ethan Cross, the 28-year-old tech dynasty heir whom Wall Street Journal dubbed the Phantom of Finance, the individual nobody dared to challenge during merger negotiations, the guy who, according to New York's social elite Whisper Network, hadn't genuinely smiled since 2019, and he was dressed in charcoal silk pajamas. "Hello there," Madison whispered, still crouched behind the Italian leather armchair as if invisibility were possible through willpower alone. "Pretend you never saw me." Ethan methodically closed his laptop, removed his glasses with precise movements, and examined her with those storm-gray eyes she'd memorized from Fortune magazine covers. "Given that you just infiltrated my private quarters at nearly midnight on a Wednesday evening," he said, his voice carrying the refined cadence of Ivy League education mixed with Silicon Valley innovation, "observing you appears to be unavoidable." Madison squeezed her eyes shut. Blast. This was a disaster. "Listen, I can totally explain." "By all means." Ethan gestured gracefully toward the chair beside his bed. "Concealing yourself behind my custom furniture seems rather uncomfortable." She wavered. Beyond the bedroom, security personnel voices grew more distinct. "They absolutely cannot discover me here," she muttered, speaking more to herself than to him. Ethan cocked his head, intrigued. "Who cannot discover you?" "Your protection detail. I sort of gained unauthorized access." "Sort of?" Madison nibbled her lower lip. What had possessed her to accept this wild scheme from Lily? "Fine, completely. I completely gained unauthorized access. Your sister contracted my services." Ethan's entire body went rigid. "My sister passed away 3 years ago." The silence that descended was so profound, Madison could hear her own cardiovascular system. Even the classical composition seemed to diminish in volume, as though the penthouse itself was suspended in anticipation. "Lily," she breathed. "Lily Cross. Platinum blonde bob, approximately 25 years old. Obsessed with Broadway musicals and bears a small, crescent-shaped scar on her left temple from when you two were children, and she tumbled from the oak tree at your family's Martha's Vineyard estate." Ethan became statue still, so motionless that Madison wondered if he'd entered some kind of meditative trance. Then, with deliberate precision, he reached for his nightstand and retrieved his smartphone. "Security Command, Ethan speaking. Disregard the previous alert. My scheduled creative consultant has arrived and is currently with me. Resume standard patrol rotations." He disconnected and focused on her with laser-sharp intensity that made Madison feel as though she were being analyzed by advanced military technology. "Lily died in an automobile collision in December 2021, he stated, his tone measured, yet betraying something fragile beneath the surface. "Therefore, you will provide me with an extremely detailed explanation of how a deceased individual managed to hire you for breaking and entering." Madison's throat constricted. This scenario definitely hadn't appeared in Lily's carefully laid plans. "Manhattan, Upper East Side penthouse, 11:54 p.m. Madison slowly emerged from behind the Italian leather armchair, her legs unsteady, not merely from crouching but from the way Ethan's penetrating gaze tracked her every movement. The classical piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat she recognized, continued its haunting melody, creating an unexpectedly intimate soundtrack for what might become her final conversation before criminal prosecution. "Your sister," Madison began, then paused. "How does one explain to someone that their deceased sibling hired you through encrypted messaging apps and coffee shop rendezvous that felt more authentic than most relationships with living people?" Ethan indicated the chair once more. This time, Madison accepted the invitation. "Let's start with your full name," he said, settling back against the tufted headboard while keeping his MacBook within arm's reach. Even in sleepwear, he radiated the controlled authority that made Fortune 500 executives break into cold sweats. "Madison Harper. I'm a freelance digital strategist and part-time social media consultant for emerging brands in Brooklyn." She tucked an errant strand of auburn hair behind her ear, a nervous habit. "Primarily artisanal coffee roasters and vintage boutiques in Williamsburg. And my allegedly living sister located you through what channels?" Madison retrieved her iPhone, fingers trembling slightly. "She contacted me 4 weeks ago through LinkedIn, said she required assistance with a project involving her brother who'd transformed into..." She scrolled through saved screenshots. A workaholic recluse who'd forgotten the art of living. Ethan's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Show me the correspondence." Madison hesitated, then surrendered her device. Ethan scrolled through the conversation thread, his face growing increasingly perplexed with each exchange. "This defies logical explanation," he murmured, reading aloud. "Ethan hasn't genuinely laughed since I departed. He requires someone capable of rekindling his capacity for joy. He's drowning in survivor's guilt, and I cannot bear witness any longer." Ethan glanced up sharply. "These are intimate details only Lily possessed." "She also knew about your Sunday evening ritual," Madison said quietly. "Classical music, quarterly financial projections, and salted caramel gelato from that exclusive artisanal shop in Soho." Ethan's smartphone slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the marble nightstand. "Nobody knows about the gelato tradition." Silence stretched between them like a violin string pulled to its breaking point. Outside, Manhattan's nocturnal symphony continued, distant jazz from a late-night club, the whisper of taxis navigating empty streets, occasional laughter echoing from sidewalk cafes. But within this luxurious bedroom, time seemed frozen in amber. "There's additional information," Madison whispered. Ethan's jaw tensed visibly. "What kind of additional information?" She revealed. "She told me that you blame yourself for the collision, that you were scheduled to collect her that evening but remained at a board meeting instead, that you've been inflicting punishment upon yourself ever since by working 20-hour days and severing connections with everyone who genuinely cares." The color drained from Ethan's aristocratic features. She explained. Madison continued, her heart fracturing at the anguish she witnessed in his eyes, that she's been attempting to communicate signs for 2 years, but you're too analytically stubborn to recognize them. So she decided to dispatch a human messenger instead. Ethan rose abruptly, pacing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a breathtaking panorama of the city's glittering skyline. His reflection appeared haunted against the urban constellation below. "This transcends rational boundaries," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "She predicted you'd respond exactly like that." Madison joined him at the windows, maintaining respectful distance. "She said you'd call it irrational, then commence analyzing it like a corporate acquisition, searching for logical frameworks." "Because logical frameworks exist." Ethan pivoted to face her, running fingers through his dark hair. "Elaborate psychological manipulation, social engineering. Someone conducted extensive research on my family history and..." "Ethan," he stopped mid-sentence. Something about her pronunciation of his name, gentle yet firm, like someone who understood his essence, caused his analytical defenses to waver. She mentioned you have a distinctive scar on your right shoulder blade, shaped like a lightning bolt, from when you shielded her from a falling tree branch during Hurricane Sandy when you were 14. Ethan's hand unconsciously drifted toward his shoulder. She said you still occupy the left side of your bed because you used to share adjoining rooms during family vacations, and she always claimed the right side. And she revealed. Madison's voice caught slightly. She said you preserve her favorite mug, the one with the vintage Broadway show logos, in your home office, but you inform visitors it's merely decorative. Ethan sank into the chair Madison had vacated, his head cradled in his palms. This cannot be occurring. She also anticipated you'd require tangible proof. Madison reached into her compact messenger bag and extracted a sealed envelope. She instructed me to present this if you question my credibility. With trembling hands, Ethan accepted the envelope. Inside lay a single photograph, him and Lily at the previous year's Metropolitan Opera Gala, both beaming at the camera, Lily's platinum hair catching the chandelier light. He remembered that evening vividly. It represented one of the final occasions he'd witnessed her truly radiant. But what arrested his breathing wasn't the image itself. It was the inscription on the reverse in Lily's unmistakable handwriting. Big brother, cease being a brilliant fool. Life's too precious and Madison's too perfect for you to waste time with algorithms. P.S. She drinks her coffee with excessive amounts of vanilla syrup, and she's terrified of psychological thrillers, but pretends otherwise. You're welcome. Your persistently annoying little sister who adores you infinitely. Ethan studied the message extensively, then raised his eyes to Madison. This photograph was captured 8 months before her death, he stated quietly. I'm aware. She couldn't have composed this message recently. I acknowledge that reality as well. Then how is this possible? Madison positioned herself on the bed's edge, close enough that he could detect her fragrance, something light and vanilla-scented that somehow seemed to illuminate the atmosphere. Ethan, she said softly, I don't possess explanations for how any of this transcends natural law. All I know is that 4 weeks ago, a woman who felt more substantial to me than most living individuals requested my assistance in helping her brother rediscover happiness, and despite every logical instinct screaming that this defies reason, I agreed. Ethan examined her features in the soft lamplight, noting the sincerity radiating from her emerald eyes, how she worried her lower lip when nervous, the tiny beauty mark just above her right eyebrow. What motivated your agreement? He asked finally. Madison smiled, the first authentic smile she'd offered since tumbling into his sanctuary, and Ethan felt something within his chest that had been frozen solid for 2 years begin to thaw. Because, she said, anyone loved that profoundly by someone deserves an opportunity to love themselves again. And for the first time since December 15th, 2021, Ethan Cross almost returned her smile. Manhattan, Ethan's penthouse, 12:52 a.m. You realize, Ethan said, setting down 2 bowls of the promised salted caramel gelato, that everything about this situation violates the principles of physics, rational thought, and basic human psychology. Madison accepted her bowl gratefully, noting that he'd somehow intuited she preferred the smaller spoon. And yet here we are. They'd relocated to his living room, a space that appeared designed by someone with impeccable taste and unlimited resources, yet felt as inhabited as a museum showroom. The city sparkled beyond panoramic windows, and Madison found herself wondering when Ethan had last truly observed that vista, instead of simply existing within its presence. Here we are, he echoed, settling onto the opposite end of the Italian leather sectional. Even relaxed, he maintained perfect posture. A complete stranger in my living room at nearly 1 a.m., consuming artisanal gelato, and claiming employment by my deceased sister. When you phrase it that way, it does sound rather extraordinary. Rather, Ethan raised an eyebrow. Madison, this doesn't register on any scale of rather extraordinary. This occupies absolutely impossible territory. Madison savored a spoonful of gelato, appreciating the delicate balance of salt and sweetness. Lily said you'd require a business case for accepting impossible phenomena. Perceptive girl. The affection in his voice was unmistakable. She always understood my cognitive processes. So here's your business case, Madison said, rotating to face him completely. Scenario A. I'm an elaborate fraud who invested weeks researching your family, somehow acquired a photograph that shouldn't exist with handwriting that perfectly replicates your dead sister's, and infiltrated your apartment to accomplish... What exactly? Steal your premium gelato? Ethan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Scenario B, Madison continued, acknowledges that sometimes impossible events occur, and perhaps, just perhaps, love transcends logic. You're presenting a false dichotomy, Ethan pointed out. There exists Scenario C, shared psychological episode induced by grief and excessive caffeine consumption. Are you experiencing a psychological episode currently? Ethan observed her, genuinely observed. The way her eyes crinkled slightly during moments of amusement, how she tucked her legs beneath her like a contented cat. The small scar on her wrist that resembled a childhood kitchen mishap. No, he said quietly. You're undeniably real. Then we returned to A or B. Ethan set aside his gelato and reclined, studying her intently. You want to know the most peculiar aspect? That your sister might be communicating from beyond physical existence? That I haven't contacted law enforcement. Ethan ran fingers through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. 4 hours ago, if someone had predicted I'd be having this conversation, I'd have recommended immediate psychiatric consultation. But sitting here with you, it feels normal. It feels like the first normal experience I've had in 2 years. Madison felt something warm unfurl within her chest. Lily predicted you'd express something similar. Ethan laughed, actually laughed, a rusty sound like vocal cords out of practice. Naturally, she did. Did she script this entire interaction? Only the crucial elements. Madison grinned. She said I'd need to improvise the remainder based on your endearing tendency to analyze everything to death. Endearing? Her terminology, not mine. Madison paused, then added with deliberate mischief, I was considering charmingly neurotic. Ethan stared at her momentarily, then laughed again, louder this time, more genuine. You know, most people exercise extreme caution when joking with me. Maybe that's the fundamental problem. Meaning? Madison gestured around the immaculate apartment. When did someone last treat you like a human being instead of a corporate position? When did anyone recently tease you, or challenge your opinions, or tell you that you're being ridiculous? Ethan's expression grew contemplative. Lily was the final person who dared. And how did that feel? Like being authentically alive. The words suspended between them, weighted with significance. Madison sensed the shift. That moment when two individuals realize they're transitioning from strangers to something undefined yet meaningful. Ethan, she said carefully, what if this is genuine? Not necessarily the supernatural elements, but what if Lily truly discovered a method to send you what you need? And what do you believe I need? Madison met his gaze steadily. Someone who isn't intimidated by you. Someone who'll challenge your assumptions and make you laugh and remind you that existence should encompass more than quarterly earnings reports and corporate mergers. Ethan remained quiet for an extended moment. And what do you gain from this arrangement? Madison's turned to appear thoughtful. Honestly, I'm uncertain yet, but Lily said I'd discover the answer. What else did she reveal about this entire situation? Madison retrieved her phone again, scrolling to a screenshot she'd saved. She said, and I quote, "My brother possesses brilliance, kindness, and humor, but he's forgotten all those qualities about himself. He needs someone to remind him, someone who'll remain long enough for him to believe it." Remain? She suggested I might want to accept that consulting position you're going to offer me. Ethan blinked. I haven't offered any position. Yet. Madison's smile radiated pure mischief. But you will. Probably within the next 15 minutes. Something about needing a digital transformation consultant for your East Coast expansion, or perhaps assistance with your company's millennial market penetration. Ethan stared at her. I don't have an East Coast expansion planned. You do now. I don't require assistance with millennial demographics. Everyone requires assistance with millennial demographics, Ethan. Your company's last Instagram post featured a stock photo of a handshake. How do you know about my company's Instagram? I conducted thorough reconnaissance before infiltrating your apartment. I excel at research. Madison grinned. Lily said that would impress you. Ethan shook his head, but he was almost smiling again. This is absolutely insane. You keep repeating that observation. Because it continues being accurate. Madison stood, carrying her empty gelato bowl toward the kitchen. Ethan watched her navigate his space as though she belonged there, noted how she instinctively located the correct cabinet for the dishware. Madison, he called after her. Yes? If, and I'm stating if, I were to accept that this is somehow authentic, that my sister genuinely orchestrated this encounter, what would she expect as the outcome? Madison leaned against the marble kitchen counter, considering. She said you'd ask that question. And she said to inform you that she doesn't expect anything except for you to give me, a genuine opportunity. Not as a business transaction or a problem requiring solution, but as two people who might actually appreciate each other if they stopped overanalyzing everything. Ethan joined her in the kitchen, close enough that she could observe the amber flecks in his gray eyes. And do you think we might appreciate each other? He asked quietly. Madison felt her heart skip. Ask me again in 1 week. Is that the duration of this experiment? That's how long it'll take for you to admit you're going to offer me that position. Ethan laughed again, and Madison realized she was rapidly becoming addicted to that sound. You're remarkably confident. Your sister provided excellent training. Ethan reached past her for a glass, his arm brushing hers briefly. Neither moved away. 1 week, he said. 1 week? I'll grant you 1 week to prove that impossible things can happen. Digital consulting position, trial basis, but I have conditions. Madison raised an eyebrow. Naturally you do. First, no more breaking and entering. Use conventional entry methods like a normal person. Reasonable. Second, if this proves to be an elaborate deception, I'm pursuing criminal charges. Also reasonable, if slightly insulting to my non-criminal sensibilities. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile this time. Third, you must help me determine how Lily is accomplishing this. Deal. Madison extended her hand. Partners in impossible things? Ethan took her hand, noting how perfectly it fit within his. Partners in impossible things. As they shook on it, both experienced that electric moment when everything shifts, when the universe adjusts slightly on its axis and suddenly anything seems achievable. Even love. Especially love. Manhattan Cross Industries Tower. Day 3, 2:47 p.m. Madison stood in the lobby of Ethan's company, attempting not to gawk at the 40-foot living wall installation, or the reception desk that appeared carved from a single block of obsidian. 3 days ago, she'd been struggling to afford rent on a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Now she possessed a temporary office on the 52nd floor and a security badge that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The elevator ride to the executive floors felt like ascending into rarefied atmosphere. Madison caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Navy blazer she'd borrowed from her roommate, hair pulled into what she hoped passed for professional sophistication, and the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing she was about to spend 8 hours daily with a man who made her pulse race just by existing. Miss Harper? A woman in an impeccably tailored Chanel suit approached as the elevator doors whispered open. I'm Victoria Sterling, Mr. Cross's executive assistant. He's prepared for your 3 p.m. consultation meeting. Victoria led Madison through corridors that resembled a modern art gallery more than office space. The 52nd floor maintained the kind of hushed reverence usually reserved for cathedrals or high-end auction houses. Ethan's office occupied a corner of the building with panoramic views of Manhattan that probably added several million to the company's real estate valuation. The space was exactly what Madison had anticipated: minimalist, efficient, and completely devoid of personality except for one small detail that made her heart squeeze: Lily's vintage Broadway mug sitting on his mahogany desk, filled with expensive fountain pens. Punctual, Ethan observed, glancing up from his computer array. He'd exchanged the silk pajamas for a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than Madison's annual income, but she was pleased to note his hair retained that slightly tousled quality. Some habits apparently transcended professional environments. Lily mentioned you have zero tolerance for tardiness. Lily mentioned numerous things, apparently. Ethan gestured toward the chair across from his desk. How are you adjusting to your temporary arrangement? Madison settled into what was undoubtedly the most comfortable office chair she'd ever experienced. Your facilities management team is incredibly efficient. I have a workspace, computer access, and enough corporate coffee to fuel a small city. Excellent. Ethan closed his laptop and focused his complete attention on her. Something Madison was discovering could be both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. I've been considering our conversation from the other evening. Which part specifically? The part where you claimed my sister orchestrated this entire scenario. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those analytical gray eyes. I've spent considerable time attempting to develop rational explanations. Madison raised an eyebrow. Any success with that endeavor? Absolutely none. Ethan's admission carried a note of frustration that suggested he wasn't accustomed to unsolvable problems. I've consulted with private investigators, digital forensics specialists, even a psychology professor from Columbia who specializes in grief-induced hallucinations. That sounds expensive and thorough. It was both, and completely unproductive. Ethan opened a manila folder on his desk. The handwriting analysis confirms the inscription matches Lily's penmanship perfectly. The photograph's metadata indicates it was captured at the Metropolitan Opera Gala exactly as I remembered. There's no evidence of digital manipulation. Madison felt a chill of validation mixed with apprehension. So what's your conclusion? That either I'm experiencing a complete psychological breakdown, Ethan said with characteristic precision, or something genuinely inexplicable is occurring. Which option terrifies you more? Ethan was quiet for several moments, his gaze drifting toward the windows where afternoon sunlight painted Manhattan's skyline in golden hues. Honestly, the possibility that it's real. Why? Because if it's real, it means Lily has been... Ethan's voice caught almost imperceptibly. Watching me self-destruct for 2 years. It means she's witnessed every 18-hour workday, every social invitation I've declined, every time I've chosen isolation over human connection. Madison felt her heart contract at the pain in his voice. Ethan, what if she's not watching you self-destruct? What if she's simply waiting for you to remember who you used to be? And who was that? Someone who laughed regularly, someone who took risks, someone who believed in possibilities instead of just probabilities. Madison leaned forward slightly. Someone who would have found this entire situation fascinating instead of terrifying. Ethan's mouth curved slightly. You think you knew the previous version of me? I think Lily described him in considerable detail. Madison smiled. She said you used to sneak out of board meetings to catch matinee performances of experimental theater. She said you once spent an entire weekend learning to make perfect soufflé because you'd promised to cook dinner for her boyfriend's parents. She said you believed in magic. I believed in probability and market analysis. Same thing, according to Lily. She said you had an extraordinary ability to see potential where others saw only data. Ethan stood and walked to his windows, hands clasped behind his back in a gesture Madison was beginning to recognize as his thinking posture. The morning she died, we had an argument. The admission hung in the air like morning fog, heavy and obscuring. Madison waited, sensing that interruption would shatter whatever fragile trust was building between them. She wanted me to leave work early and attend some gallery opening with her. I told her I had reports to finish, meetings to prepare for. I said we'd go to the next one. Ethan's reflection in the window looked haunted. There wasn't a next one. What were you arguing about, really? Ethan turned back toward her, and Madison saw something vulnerable in his expression that hadn't been there moments before. She said I was becoming someone she didn't recognize, someone who prioritized spreadsheets over relationships, who measured success only in financial terms. Was she right? Completely. The admission seemed to cost him something. I'd been so focused on exceeding our father's business achievements that I'd forgotten why success mattered in the first place. Madison rose from her chair and approached the windows, standing close enough to Ethan that she could detect his cologne, something sophisticated and understated that probably came from a boutique most people couldn't afford. So what happened after the argument? She left. Said she was going to the gallery opening alone, that maybe solitude would help her understand how I'd become such a stranger. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. 3 hours later, the police called to inform me she'd been struck by a drunk driver 6 blocks from the gallery. The silence that followed felt sacred, as though the office itself was holding space for grief that had been contained too long. Madison watched Ethan's reflection in the glass, noting the tension in his shoulders, the careful control he maintained even in moments of vulnerability. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said quietly. "About Lily wanting to send you someone who wouldn't be intimidated by you. And maybe she knew that forgiveness had to come from outside yourself. Maybe she understood that you'd never grant yourself permission to heal." Ethan met her gaze in the window's reflection. "So she sent you to do it for me?" "Maybe she sent me to remind you that healing is possible, that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. And how exactly does one accomplish that?" Madison turned to face him directly, surprised by her own boldness. "By accepting that your sister loved you enough to find a way past death itself to ensure your happiness. By recognizing that honoring her memory means choosing life, not penance." Ethan studied her face with an intensity that made Madison's breath catch. "You make it sound simple. Simple, not easy. There's a difference. And if I can't? If I'm too damaged to remember how to live normally?" Madison's smile was gentle but determined. "Then I suppose it's fortunate that you have a week to practice with someone who specializes in impossible things." Ethan's laugh was soft but genuine. "You realize this could be the most unconventional business arrangement in corporate history? The best ones usually are." Before Ethan could respond, his office phone buzzed with Victoria's voice. "Mr. Cross, your 4 p.m. appointment has arrived early. Shall I ask them to wait?" Ethan glanced at Madison, then at his calendar. "Actually, Victoria, please reschedule the 4 p.m. Something more important has developed." "Certainly, sir." As the intercom clicked off, Madison raised an eyebrow. "Something more important? My new digital consultant and I need to discuss her unconventional methodology." Ethan's smile was becoming more natural, less guarded, starting with how she plans to prove that impossible things can happen. "Well," Madison said, settling back into her chair with newfound confidence, "Step 1 involves teaching you to smile without calculating the percentage likelihood of disappointment. And Step 2 is remembering that some risks are worth taking, even when the data suggests otherwise." Ethan returned to his desk, but instead of assuming his usual commanding position behind it, he perched on its edge, closer to Madison's chair. "This is definitely the most interesting consultation meeting I've ever conducted. Lily said you'd appreciate the novelty." She was right about that too, it seems. Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "Madison, may I ask you something personal? Considering I broke into your bedroom 3 days ago, I think we're past formality barriers. What are you hoping to gain from this arrangement?" "Really?" Madison considered the question carefully. "Honestly, for the first time in months, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, like I'm part of something bigger than my daily routine, even though that something might be impossible. Especially because it might be impossible." Madison's eyes sparkled with mischief, Besides, impossible things tend to be the most worthwhile. Ethan found himself leaning slightly closer, drawn by her enthusiasm, and the way afternoon light caught the copper highlights in her hair. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "Good. Predictability is overrated." "Indeed it is." Ethan's voice had dropped to something warmer, more intimate. "So, Ms. Harper, where do we begin this experiment in impossibility?" Madison's heart fluttered at the subtle shift in his tone, the way his formal demeanor was gradually melting into something more authentic. "We begin by acknowledging that your sister possessed excellent taste in matchmaking." "Matchmaking. Oh, did I not mention that part?" Madison's grin was pure mischief. Lily was very specific about her expectations for this arrangement. Professional consultation was just the cover story. Ethan stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed, the first completely uninhibited sound of joy Madison had heard from him. It was a beautiful sound, rich and genuine and full of life. "Of course it was," he said, still chuckling. "I should have known Lily wouldn't settle for simply saving my career. She'd want to save my entire future. Smart woman. The smartest." Ethan's expression grew soft with memory and something that looked like hope. "And if she trusted you with that mission, then maybe you can trust me too? Maybe I already do." The admission hung between them like a bridge across impossible distance, fragile but real. Madison felt something shift in the space they shared, a recognition that they were stepping into territory neither had mapped, but both were willing to explore. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its relentless rhythm, but inside Ethan Cross's office, time moved differently. It moved like possibility, like second chances, like love learning to breathe again. Manhattan, various locations. Day 5, Friday. Madison's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a text message that made her heart skip exactly 3 beats. "Ethan, work. Emergency consultation required. Meet me at the Bethesda fountain in Central Park. Wear comfortable shoes. Trust me." She stared at the message while her coffee maker gurgled to life in her tiny Brooklyn Heights kitchen. In the 2 days since their revelation-filled office conversation, their professional relationship had evolved into something that defied conventional categorization. They were colleagues who shared lingering glances during strategy meetings. They were consultant and client who found excuses to work late together. They were two people dancing around an attraction that grew stronger with every shared laugh, every accidental touch, every moment when conversation drifted from business into something infinitely more personal. But 6:47 a.m. text messages about emergency consultations? That was new territory. Madison grabbed her favorite leather jacket, laced up her most comfortable sneakers, and caught the first train into Manhattan. The early morning subway ride gave her time to consider the transformation she'd witnessed in Ethan over the past 48 hours. The man who'd seemed carved from marble when she first tumbled into his bedroom was revealing layers of warmth, humor, and vulnerability that made her pulse quicken whenever he was near. Yesterday, he'd laughed so hard at her impression of their pompous marketing director that he'd snorted coffee through his nose. The day before, he'd absently reached over to fix a strand of her hair that had escaped during a particularly animated presentation about millennial social media habits. Small gestures, but each one felt significant, like watching someone remember how to be human. Central Park at 7:30 a.m. possessed an ethereal quality that made Manhattan feel almost magical. Early joggers traced paths around the reservoir, dog walkers congregated near the meadows, and the morning light filtered through autumn leaves in ways that belonged in impressionist paintings. Madison found Ethan standing beside the Bethesda fountain, hands in the pockets of dark jeans that fit him entirely too well, looking like he'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren advertisement. "Emergency consultation?" Madison called as she approached. "At a fountain in Central Park?" Ethan turned toward her and Madison felt that familiar flutter in her stomach at his smile. "The most urgent kind," he said. "The kind that involves proving impossible things can happen. I'm intrigued and slightly concerned." "Perfect combination for what I have planned." Ethan gestured toward a nearby bench where 2 coffee cups and a bakery bag waited. I brought breakfast and answers. Madison settled beside him, accepting the coffee gratefully. What kind of answers? The kind that might change everything we thought we knew about this situation. Ethan pulled a manila envelope from his jacket pocket. I received these yesterday evening, from the private investigator I hired. I thought you said the investigation was unproductive. The official investigation was, but I asked him to dig deeper into something specific. Ethan opened the envelope carefully. The night Lily died, I told you we'd argued about me missing her gallery opening. Yes. What I didn't mention was which gallery, or what the exhibition featured. Ethan pulled out several photographs. The opening was at the Morrison Contemporary Gallery in Soho. The exhibition was called Messages Across Time: Contemporary Artists Explore Life After Death. Madison's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. That's oddly specific? Remarkably coincidental? Ethan's voice carried a mixture of wonder and disbelief. It gets more interesting. The centerpiece of the exhibition was an interactive installation by an artist named David Chen. Participants were invited to write messages to deceased loved ones, which were then projected onto a wall using some kind of experimental holographic technology. Ethan, what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm presenting data. Ethan handed her the photographs. These are images from that night taken by the gallery security cameras. The investigator obtained them through considerable effort and financial persuasion. Madison studied the photographs, her breath catching as she recognized a familiar figure among the gallery visitors. That's Lily. Confirmed. Timestamp shows 8:47 p.m., approximately 30 minutes before the accident. Ethan pointed to the next photograph. This shows her at the interactive installation, writing something on one of the provided cards. Can you see what she wrote? Unfortunately, no, but I can see something else. Ethan indicated a detail in the photograph that Madison had missed. Look at what she's wearing. Madison examined the image more carefully. Lily was dressed in a flowing emerald dress with a distinctive silver bracelet that caught the gallery lights. It's beautiful, but I'm not sure what. That bracelet belonged to our grandmother. Family legend claimed it possessed protective properties. Lily only wore it during significant life events, graduations, job interviews, first dates she was nervous about. Ethan's voice grew quiet, the kind of occasions when she wanted extra luck or courage. So she thought writing that message was significant. Significant enough to invoke whatever supernatural protection she believed the bracelet provided. Ethan gathered the photographs carefully. There's more. The gallery's guest log shows she signed in under a name that wasn't hers. What name? Madison Lily Cross. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Madison set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. That's impossible. According to conventional logic, yes. According to the evidence we've accumulated over the past week. Ethan shrugged. Apparently impossible is becoming our specialty. Madison stood abruptly, pacing toward the fountain as though movement might help her process the revelation. You're telling me that your sister, on the night she died, wrote a message to someone from beyond death, wore a protective bracelet, and signed in using my name combined with hers. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Ethan, I didn't even know you existed 5 weeks ago. How could she have known my name? I have a theory about that. Ethan joined her beside the fountain, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What if time doesn't work the way we assume it does? What if some connections exist outside linear progression? Madison turned to face him, searching his expression for signs of jest. Instead, she found complete sincerity and something that looked like wonder. You're serious? Completely. Consider the evidence. Lily somehow knew details about you that she couldn't have researched. She orchestrated our meeting with precision that suggests knowledge of future events. She wrote that inscription on a photograph months before her death, yet it referenced things that hadn't happened yet. That would mean love transcends our understanding of physics, time, and rational possibility. Ethan's hands found hers, warm and steady and real. That would mean my sister loved both of us enough to orchestrate something miraculous. Madison felt tears she hadn't expected gathering behind her eyes. Both of us. Madison, do you honestly believe this is only about helping me heal from grief? Ethan's thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles. Do you think Lily would have chosen someone random for this mission? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe you needed this too. Maybe you needed to feel part of something meaningful, something bigger than daily routine and monthly rent payments. Maybe you needed to remember that your life could be extraordinary. Madison's breath caught at the accuracy of his observation. How did you... Because I've been watching you, Madison. Really watching. I've seen how you light up during our late-night strategy sessions. I've noticed how you stay at the office until I'm ready to leave, like you don't want the day to end. I've observed how you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. And how do I look at you? Ethan stepped closer, close enough that Madison had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Like you're falling for me as hard as I'm falling for you. The admission hung between them like morning mist, beautiful and fragile and transformative. Madison felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Ethan's free hand rose to cup her cheek. Ethan, tell me I'm wrong, he said quietly. Tell me this is just professional consultation and I'll step back. Tell me you don't feel this connection growing stronger every day and I'll respect those boundaries. Madison searched his eyes, finding vulnerability and hope and something that looked remarkably like love. I can't tell you that. Because it would be dishonest? Because it would be impossible. Madison smiled through her tears. And we're specialists in impossible things, remember? Ethan's answering smile was radiant. We are indeed. So what happens now? Now we conduct an experiment in controlled impossibility. Ethan's voice carried notes of mischief that reminded Madison why Lily had described him as someone who believed in magic. Starting with breakfast in Central Park, followed by a walking tour of places that hold significance for people in love. People in love. That's the hypothesis we're testing today. Ethan's eyes sparkled with amusement and something deeper. The theory that two people can fall in love in 5 days when assisted by supernatural intervention and mutual appreciation for ridiculous circumstances. Madison laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. That's quite a hypothesis. I have empirical evidence to support it. Such as the fact that I think about you constantly, such as the way you make me laugh at completely inappropriate moments during board meetings. Such as the reality that for the first time in 2 years, I wake up looking forward to the day ahead. That's compelling data. There's more. Yesterday, when you absently hummed while reviewing our social media analytics, I realized I was memorizing the melody. This morning, when I saw your text response time was slower than usual, I worried you might be having second thoughts about this entire arrangement. Madison felt warmth spreading through her chest like sunrise. And what would you have done if I was having second thoughts? Probably something dramatically romantic and completely out of character. Showed up at your apartment with flowers. Written you a letter explaining why impossible things are worth believing in. Maybe hired a skywriter. A skywriter. Lily always said I was prone to grand gestures when properly motivated. Ethan grinned. Apparently, your proper motivation. Madison reached up to straighten his jacket collar, a gesture that felt both intimate and natural. For the record, my slow text response time was because I spent 20 minutes staring at your message and trying not to seem too eager. And what conclusion did you reach? That eagerness might be warranted in this situation. Ethan's laugh was pure joy. In that case, may I suggest we begin this experiment immediately? What did you have in mind? A comprehensive tour of romantic locations throughout Manhattan, during which we'll gather data about our compatibility, test our hypothesis about accelerated emotional connection, and determine whether supernatural matchmaking produces superior results to conventional dating methods. Madison grinned. That sounds like the most scientifically romantic proposition I've ever received. I aim to please my consulting partner. Just your consulting partner? Ethan's expression grew serious, though his eyes retained their warmth. "Madison Harper, would you like to be my partner in considerably more than consulting?" The question hung in the morning air like a promise, beautiful and terrifying and full of potential. Madison thought about Lily's mysterious orchestrations, about impossible photographs and prophetic text messages, about the way Ethan made her feel like her life was finally becoming the adventure she'd always dreamed it could be. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." Ethan's smile could have powered the entire city. "Excellent. Then let's go fall in love properly. Lead the way, Mr. Cross." As they walked away from the fountain, Madison's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She glanced at it absently, then stopped walking so abruptly that Ethan nearly collided with her. "Madison, what is it?" She held up her phone with shaking hands. The message was brief but unmistakable. "Have fun today, you two. I knew you were perfect for each other." "Xoxo." Ethan stared at the screen, then looked around the park as though expecting to see his sister materialize among the joggers and dog walkers. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose we have official supernatural approval." Madison laughed, feeling giddy with possibility and wonder, and the beginning of something that felt remarkably like forever. "I suppose we do." They resumed walking, hands intertwined, hearts synchronized, ready to explore the impossible mathematics of love in a city that suddenly seemed full of magic. Behind them, though neither noticed, the fountain's water caught the morning light in patterns that looked almost like messages, almost like blessings, almost like love made visible. Manhattan and beyond, day 7 through 10 years later. Sunday, day 7, the final test. Madison woke up in Ethan's guest bedroom to the unmistakable aroma of something burning and what sounded like creative profanity echoing from the kitchen. After yesterday's magical odyssey through Central Park, where they'd fed ducks at the pond and shared ice cream while watching street performers, followed by a sunset walk across the Brooklyn Bridge that had left them both breathless from more than just the climb, and an impromptu dinner at a tiny family-owned Italian restaurant in Little Italy, where Ethan had made her laugh until her sides ached with his surprisingly accurate impression of their pompous waiter. She'd accepted his invitation to stay the weekend. Not in his bedroom. They were taking things deliberately slow despite the supernatural acceleration of their emotional connection, but close enough that she could hear him attempting what she suspected was breakfast preparation, with the same analytical intensity he applied to quarterly earnings reports. She padded to the kitchen in borrowed pajamas, silk ones that probably cost more than her monthly Metro card, and felt like wearing liquid luxury. Finding Ethan standing before his state-of-the-art Viking range, wearing nothing but gray sweatpants that hung perfectly on his lean frame, and an expression of intense concentration that would have been more appropriate for diffusing a nuclear device. His dark hair was adorably disheveled in 17 different directions. There was a smudge of what looked suspiciously like pancake batter decorating his left cheek, and he was consulting his iPhone with the same intensity usually reserved for merger and acquisition documents. "How to flip pancakes without destroying entire kitchen," he muttered, apparently reading from a WikiHow article with the seriousness of someone studying constitutional law. Step 1. Use a spatula with confidence. Well, that's remarkably unhelpful. Madison pressed her lips together to suppress a smile that threatened to split her face in half. "Need assistance from your consulting partner?" Ethan turned at the sound of her voice, and the smile that spread across his aristocratic features made her heart perform entire Olympic gymnastics routines, complete with perfect dismounts. The morning light streaming through his floor-to-ceiling windows caught the amber flecks in his gray eyes, and Madison realized with startling clarity that she could spend the rest of her life waking up to that exact expression and never grow tired of the way it made her feel like the most important person in his universe. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice carrying that morning roughness that did absolutely devastating things to her nervous system. "I was attempting to demonstrate my domestic capabilities through the ancient art of pancake creation. And how's that scientific endeavor progressing?" I've successfully proven that my culinary skills are inversely proportional to my business acumen, which suggests I should probably stick to corporate strategy and leave food preparation to qualified professionals. Ethan gestured toward a pan containing what might once have been pancakes, but now resembled abstract expressionist art that Jackson Pollock would have found concerning. I may have severely overestimated my ability to multitask between breakfast preparation and responding to weekend emails from Tokyo. Madison approached the stove, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin and catch the scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him that made her want to curl up against his chest and never move. May I offer assistance before you accidentally prove that advanced degrees from Wharton are useless against basic life skills? Please, before I single-handedly destroy both my kitchen and my remaining dignity. She took the spatula from his hand, their fingers brushing in a contact that sent electricity racing up her arm and straight to her heart. The touch was brief but significant, loaded with the weight of everything that had developed between them over the past week of impossible revelations and growing attraction. The secret, Madison said, beginning to rescue the remaining pancake batter with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to cook by necessity rather than choice, is patience and proper heat management. Two qualities that serve you well in boardrooms but apparently abandon you in kitchen environments. Qualities I apparently lack when faced with the complexities of breakfast preparation. Qualities you demonstrate perfectly in other areas of your life. Madison began creating actual pancake-shaped objects with movements that looked effortless, but required years of practice. Besides, I find your domestic incompetence rather endearing. Endearing? It makes you human, approachable, vulnerable. She glanced at him over her shoulder, noting how the morning light turned his skin golden. It suggests that the great Ethan Cross, master of the financial universe, might actually need someone in his life. Ethan moved behind her, his hands coming to rest on her waist with tentative gentleness, as though he was afraid she might disappear if he held too tightly. I do need someone in my life. I need you in my life. The simple declaration, spoken against her ear in his morning rough voice that carried undertones of vulnerability and hope, made Madison's breath catch in her throat. She leaned back against his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong against her shoulder blade, and marveled at how perfectly they fit together, despite coming from completely different worlds. Ethan, I know it's only been a week. I know this contradicts every rational approach to relationship development that I've ever studied or implemented. I know that any reasonable person would suggest we're moving too quickly, that we need more time to truly know each other. His arms tightened around her waist, holding her against him like she was something precious he was afraid of losing. But Madison, I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I've already fallen completely, irrevocably, in a way that defies every logical principle I've ever subscribed to, and challenges everything I thought I understood about human emotional development. Madison turned in his arms, the pancakes temporarily forgotten as she faced him fully. His expression was completely open, vulnerable in a way she suspected few people ever witnessed, and absolutely sincere. There was no calculation in his gray eyes, no strategic thinking, just pure emotional honesty that took her breath away. You realize this means Lily was right about absolutely everything. Lily was right about everything. Ethan agreed, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. She knew I needed someone who would challenge my assumptions, make me laugh at inappropriate moments during board meetings, remind me how to live instead of just exist. She knew I needed someone brave enough to break into my apartment and stubborn enough to believe in impossible things even when all available evidence suggested otherwise. And what else did she know? She knew that I was capable of loving someone so completely that it would fundamentally change everything about how I see the world, how I prioritize my time, how I define success and happiness. Ethan's thumbs traced gentle patterns across her cheekbones. She knew that person would be you, and she knew that I would be too analytically stubborn to find you without supernatural intervention. Madison felt tears gathering in her eyes. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears. Tears that came from recognizing a moment that would divide her life into distinct periods of before Ethan and after Ethan. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I love your brilliant mind that can solve impossible business problems but gets defeated by pancake batter. I love your terrible cooking skills and the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating on something complex. I love how you make me feel like I'm capable of extraordinary things, like my life can be an adventure instead of just a series of days to get through. You are capable of extraordinary things. You've already accomplished the most extraordinary thing imaginable. You've made me believe in magic again. We made each other believe." Ethan was leaning down to kiss her, his intention clear in the way his eyes focused on her lips, when his iPhone buzzed insistently on the marble counter. He ignored it with admirable determination. It buzzed again, then launched into the urgent ringtone he reserved for genuine emergencies. "You should check that," Madison said reluctantly, though every fiber of her being wanted to ignore the outside world and exist in this perfect bubble they'd created. Weekend emergency calls from Victoria usually indicate something that actually requires immediate attention. Ethan sighed deeply, clearly torn between responsibility and desire, and reached for his phone while keeping his other arm securely around Madison's waist. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to something approaching awe as he read the screen. "Madison, you need to see this immediately." She looked at his phone, which displayed a series of increasingly urgent text messages from Victoria Sterling, his executive assistant. "Victoria, Mr. End. Cross, I apologize for the Sunday morning intrusion, but something extraordinary has occurred. Please check your email at your earliest convenience. Victoria, the Morrison Gallery in Soho has contacted our office. They claim to have something that belongs to you personally. Victoria, Mr. Cross, this concerns your sister. They say she left specific instructions about timing and circumstances. Victoria, please call me as soon as you receive this. This appears to be genuinely significant." Madison felt a familiar chill of anticipation mixed with apprehension race down her spine. "The Morrison Gallery. That's where Lily went the night she died, isn't it?" "The exact same gallery." Ethan was already pulling up his email with the focused intensity that had made him legendary in business circles, his free hand still holding Madison close, as though anchoring himself to her presence, gave him strength to face whatever revelation awaited. "Here's the detailed message from the gallery director," he read aloud, his voice growing more incredulous with each word. "Mr. Cross, during our complete renovation of the exhibition space this week, our construction team discovered something remarkable hidden behind the interactive installation from our Messages Across Time exhibition that concluded in early 2022. Your sister left something specifically for you, something she insisted we hold in secure storage until, quote, exactly the right moment when my brother brings the woman he loves to see me. I believe, based on recent events and your public appearances, that moment has now arrived. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to arrange a private viewing." Madison and Ethan stared at each other in stunned silence that seemed to stretch across dimensions. "She left something for you," Madison said slowly, her mind struggling to process the implications. 2 years ago, hidden at the gallery, with specific instructions about timing. "Hidden until I brought the woman I love to see her," Ethan repeated, his voice carrying wonder and disbelief in equal measure. How could she have known when that moment would arrive? How could she have predicted the exact circumstances? The same way she knew everything else that's happened between us. Madison smiled through the tears that had started without her permission. Because love finds a way to transcend every boundary we think exists. Monday, Day 8, the final revelation. The Morrison Gallery occupied a converted 19th century warehouse in Soho, its soaring white walls and polished concrete floors providing stark, minimalist contrast to the vibrant contemporary artwork displayed throughout the cavernous space. Madison had insisted on accompanying Ethan, partly because she couldn't bear the thought of him facing whatever Lily had left behind without emotional support, and partly because she suspected strongly that Lily's final message would concern both of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. David Chen, the gallery director, was a distinguished man in his early 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the careful, reverent demeanor of someone who'd spent decades handling precious and irreplaceable things. He greeted them personally at the gallery's entrance, leading them through the main exhibition space filled with cutting-edge contemporary art to a private viewing room behind the public areas. "Your sister was remarkably specific about her instructions," he said solemnly, placing a sealed manila envelope on the polished steel table between them. The envelope appeared aged but well preserved, with Ethan written across the front in Lily's unmistakable handwriting. "She said this package was only to be opened when you brought someone with you, someone you loved completely and unconditionally." Ethan's hand found Madison's across the table, their fingers intertwining automatically. "She actually said those exact words 2 years ago, word for word with remarkable precision. She also said that when the right person finally came with you, I would know immediately without any doubt." David smiled warmly at Madison. "I knew the moment you both walked through our doors together this morning. How could you possibly know that? Because you look at each other exactly the way your sister predicted you would, like you found your missing piece, your perfect complement. Like you've discovered something rare and precious that most people spend their entire lives searching for, without ever finding." Ethan picked up the envelope with hands that trembled slightly, his usual corporate composure completely abandoned in the face of this final communication from his beloved sister. His name was written across the front in Lily's flowing script, but underneath, in smaller, more delicate writing, were the words, "For Ethan and his impossible love story, the one I always knew he deserved." Inside the envelope were 4 items that would change everything: a letter folded with mathematical precision, a small velvet jewelry box that looked like a family heirloom, a photograph Madison had never seen before, and what appeared to be a hand-drawn map with detailed annotations in Lily's careful handwriting. Ethan unfolded the letter first, his voice breaking slightly as he began to read aloud. "My dearest brother, if you're reading this letter, it means several impossible things have finally happened. It means you've met Madison Harper and fallen completely, desperately, beautifully in love with her. It means you've finally forgiven yourself enough to accept the happiness that was always meant to be yours. It means I was right about everything, and you're probably simultaneously annoyed and grateful about my persistent meddling in your future. I need you to understand something crucial. Everything I did, the messages, the photograph, this letter, even the circumstances that brought Madison into your life, I did because I could see your future more clearly than you could see your present. Not through supernatural powers or mystical visions, but because I knew your heart better than you knew it yourself. I knew that someday you would meet someone who would make you remember who you were meant to be, before grief and guilt convinced you that happiness was a luxury you didn't deserve. Madison, if you're reading this too, and I know you are because my brother would never face something this significant alone, thank you for saving him. Thank you for being brave enough to believe in impossible things when every logical instinct probably told you to run. Thank you for loving him exactly the way he deserves to be loved, completely, unconditionally, with the kind of fierce tenderness that heals old wounds and creates new possibilities. Ethan, the night I died, I wasn't going to that gallery to see contemporary art. I was going because I'd been having dreams about your future for months. Vivid, detailed dreams about you finding someone extraordinary who would change everything. I needed to leave you something for when that day finally arrived, something that would prove love transcends every boundary we think exists. I wrote messages to your future because I believed in that future even when you couldn't. I hid things for you to find because I knew that someday you would need tangible proof that impossible things happen to people brave enough to believe in them. The bracelet in this box belonged to great-grandmother Rose, who immigrated from Ireland with nothing but faith and determination. Family legend says it brings together soulmates who are meant to find each other across impossible distances and circumstances. I wore it the night I wrote your messages because I wanted to make absolutely certain they would reach you when you needed them most. The photograph will seem impossible, but I promise you it's completely real. Look closely at the little girl in the background. That's Madison at age 7, visiting our neighborhood with her family during the summer before 2nd grade. Even then, 20 years ago, the universe was conspiring to bring you together. Even then, your paths were already intertwined in ways neither of you could have imagined. The map will lead you to one final gift, something I hid years ago in a place that holds significance for our family. Follow it when you're ready to take the next step in your impossible love story. I need you both to understand something profound. Love isn't magic, but it does create miracles. Your love will create ripples of miraculous beauty that will touch lives you'll never know about. Believe in those miracles. Embrace them fully. Live them with the kind of courage that transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. I love you both more than words in any language could ever express. Now go live the extraordinary life you were always meant to share. Forever your persistently meddling little sister, Lily P.S. Ethan, when you propose, not if, when, do it properly. Madison deserves grand romantic gestures, not a business transaction. The ring in this box has been waiting 97 years for exactly the right moment. This is that moment. The silence that followed was profound and sacred, broken only by the sound of Madison's soft crying and Ethan's unsteady breathing as he struggled to process the magnitude of what they'd just discovered. With hands that trembled visibly, Ethan opened the velvet jewelry box, revealing an antique engagement ring that looked like captured starlight, a brilliant center diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate Art Deco setting that seemed to glow with its own inner fire. Then Madison picked up the photograph with wonder-filled eyes, her breath catching as she recognized what it contained. The image showed a neighborhood block party from 20 years ago, complete with colorful balloons, folding tables laden with food, and dozens of children in various states of joyful chaos. In the center stood 8-year-old Ethan, grinning at the camera with gap-toothed happiness. And there, barely visible in the background near a flowering dogwood tree, was a little girl with auburn hair and unmistakable green eyes, watching the festivities with the shy smile of someone who'd accidentally stumbled into magic. "This is completely impossible," Madison whispered, studying her own 7-year-old face with amazement. "I remember this day. We were visiting my great-aunt Eleanor, who lived 3 blocks from your family's townhouse. I begged my parents to let me walk around the neighborhood, and I found this block party. I remember you," Ethan said suddenly, his voice filled with wonder. "You were the quiet girl who stood by the tree watching everything. I wanted to invite you to join the games, but by the time I worked up the courage to approach you, you'd disappeared. I had to go back for dinner." Madison touched the photograph reverently. "But I thought about that party for weeks afterward. I thought about the boy who kept looking over at me like he wanted to be friends." 20 years, Ethan marveled. "We've been connected for 20 years without knowing it." "Connected by something bigger than coincidence," Madison agreed, then picked up the hand-drawn map with fascination. It showed detailed directions to Central Park, specifically to a location near the Alice in Wonderland statue, with notations in Lily's careful script marking trees, benches, and landmarks with mathematical precision. "She wanted us to go treasure hunting," Madison said, tracing the route with her finger. "One final impossible thing," Ethan agreed. "Are you ready for whatever she's hidden for us?" Madison looked at the ring that had waited nearly a century for this moment, at the photograph that proved their connection transcended time, at the map that promised one more miracle. "With you, I'm ready for anything." Tuesday. Day 9. The Treasure Central Park in late afternoon possessed an almost ethereal quality that made Manhattan feel touched by magic. Golden autumn light filtered through trees that were just beginning to show hints of their seasonal transformation. Joggers traced familiar paths around the reservoir, and the Alice in Wonderland statue drew its usual crowd of delighted children, climbing on bronze mushrooms and posing with the Mad Hatter. Following Lily's map required careful attention to detail. She'd noted specific trees, the exact angle of approach, even the number of steps from the statue to a particular oak tree that appeared unremarkable, until they found the small heart carved into its bark, weathered by years but still clearly visible. 15 paces northwest from the heart, Ethan read from the map, then looked up to orient himself properly. She was remarkably thorough in her instructions. "Your sister never did anything halfway," Madison observed, watching him count steps with the same precision he probably applied to financial projections. The map led them to a spot that seemed completely ordinary, a small clearing surrounded by mature trees, with a wooden bench positioned to take advantage of dappled sunlight. But according to Lily's detailed annotations, something significant waited beneath the third oak tree from the bench, buried 2 feet down in a waterproof container she'd somehow managed to hide without detection. They'd brought a small shovel, feeling slightly ridiculous about conducting an archaeological expedition in one of the world's most famous public parks. But Lily's instructions had been explicit about depth and location. 20 minutes of careful digging revealed a metal box wrapped in multiple layers of plastic protection, obviously placed by someone who understood the importance of preserving its contents against time and weather. Inside the box was a leather portfolio containing documents, photographs, and what appeared to be a comprehensive record of their entire relationship before it had even begun. There were sketches of Madison that looked exactly like her, drawn years before they'd met. There were detailed descriptions of conversations they would have, complete with dialogue that proved startlingly accurate. There were predictions about their careers, their challenges, their growth as individuals and as a couple. But the most extraordinary item was a sealed letter marked, "Read together on the day you get engaged." Madison and Ethan looked at each other, both understanding the significance of what they'd discovered. This wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was Lily's way of orchestrating the perfect proposal, ensuring that when the moment arrived, it would be surrounded by proof of their impossible destiny. "She planned everything," Madison said with awe. "Every single detail. Every moment from the first day we met to this exact instant," Ethan agreed. Then he stood, brushing dirt from his knees, and turned to face her with an expression that made her heart stop. "Madison Harper, I had planned to wait until tonight, until I could arrange something worthy of you. But standing here, surrounded by evidence of how long the universe has been conspiring to bring us together." He dropped to one knee, pulling the antique ring from his pocket where it had resided since they'd left the gallery. "Madison, you broke into my apartment and stole my heart. You made me believe in magic and miracles and love that transcends every logical boundary. You taught me that the most important equations can't be solved with mathematics. They can only be lived with courage and faith and the willingness to believe in impossible things." Madison's hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Will you marry me?" Ethan continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you spend forever creating miracles with me? Will you be my partner in all things impossible and extraordinary? My companion in adventures we haven't even imagined yet? My wife in this life and whatever comes after?" "Yes," Madison said through her tears, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes to everything. Yes to forever. Yes to impossible things and miracle-making and loving you for all the years we have and whatever existence might come beyond that." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit as perfectly as everything else about their impossible love story. Then he stood and kissed her with all the passion and promise and profound gratitude of someone who'd been given not just a second chance at happiness, but proof that love could literally move mountains and rearrange time itself to ensure the right people found each other. As they kissed, surrounded by evidence of supernatural orchestration and overwhelming love, neither noticed the small crowd that had gathered to witness their engagement. But they both felt it, that sense of completion, of blessing, of being exactly where they were meant to be. That evening, in the privacy of Ethan's apartment, they opened the final letter. "My dearest impossible couple, if you're reading this, you're engaged. Congratulations. I told you the universe was conspiring in your favor. Your love story is just beginning. The real adventures lie ahead. The daily choice to love each other through ordinary moments and extraordinary challenges. The decision to build a life that honors both your individual dreams and your shared destiny. You'll face obstacles that will test your faith in impossible things. Choose love anyway. You'll encounter people who don't understand how you can be so certain about forever after knowing each other for such a short time. Trust your hearts anyway. You'll have moments of doubt when the magic feels distant and love feels like work. Remember this day anyway. Your love is going to change the world in ways you can't yet imagine. Not through grand gestures or public displays, but through the quiet miracles you'll create every day. The kindness you'll show strangers because you understand that love is real. The risks you'll take because you know impossible things happen. The hope you'll offer others because your love proved that destiny is real. Love each other fiercely, laugh together daily, dance in your kitchen. Travel to places that don't exist yet, have adventures that become legends. Create a family, however that looks for you, filled with love and laughter and the absolute certainty that magic is real. And remember, I'll always be with you in every moment of joy, every burst of laughter, every time you choose love over fear. Love is how we transcend death, how we touch eternity, how we prove that some connections are stronger than any force in any universe. Live extraordinarily. All my love, always and forever. Lily the Wedding. 6 months later. They were married on a perfect May morning in Central Park, at the exact spot where they'd found Lily's treasure, surrounded by 200 of their closest friends and family members who'd gathered to witness what everyone agreed was the most romantic love story they'd ever encountered. The ceremony was officiated by David Chen from the Morrison Gallery, who had become ordained specifically for their wedding after they'd asked him to represent the bridge between past and future that had made their love possible. He spoke eloquently about connections that transcend time, about love letters written to tomorrow, about the miraculous power of believing in impossible things even when all available evidence suggests otherwise. The venue was transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses and fairy lights strung between trees, a carpet of flower petals leading to an altar positioned to catch the morning sunlight, chairs arranged in intimate circles that encouraged celebration and joy rather than formal observation. Madison walked down the petal-strewn aisle in a dress that seemed to capture and reflect light, her hair adorned with the same white roses that had decorated Lily's favorite Broadway shows, her face radiant with happiness that made every guest smile just by witnessing it. Ethan waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that matched his eyes, his expression luminous with joy, and barely contained emotion as he watched his impossible love approach. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the park. "Madison, you taught me that the most beautiful equations in the universe can't be solved with logic alone. They require faith, hope, and the courage to believe in magic, even when it defies everything we think we understand about reality. You showed me that love isn't a business transaction or a calculated risk assessment, but a leap into beautiful mystery that transforms everything it touches. I promise to spend forever exploring impossible things with you, creating daily miracles together, and loving you more each day than I believed my heart could hold." Madison's vows brought tears to every eye. "Ethan, you taught me that home isn't a geographical location but a person. The person who makes you brave enough to believe your life can be extraordinary instead of merely adequate. You showed me that love stories don't have to follow conventional timelines or logical progressions, that the most beautiful connections often begin with metaphorically breaking and entering someone's heart when they least expect it. I promise to spend forever being your partner in adventure, your consultant in impossibility, your best friend in laughter and tears, and your completely devoted wife in this life and whatever might come after." They exchanged rings, hers the antique diamond that had waited nearly a century for this moment, his a simple platinum band that Madison had inscribed with coordinates marking every significant location in their love story, from his Manhattan penthouse to the Central Park bench where they'd first admitted they were falling in love. But the most magical moment came after they were pronounced married, when a gentle spring breeze scattered rose petals around them in patterns that looked almost like writing, almost like blessings, almost like a final message from someone who had orchestrated their miracle with love and patience and unwavering faith in destiny. As they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, Madison's phone buzzed with one final text from an unknown number. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you for proving that love really can conquer death. Dance beautifully tonight. Love you both beyond time and space. Well, 5 years later, the first miracle. Madison Cross stood in the nursery of their renovated Brooklyn Heights brownstone, rocking their 6-month-old daughter to sleep, while autumn rain pattered gently against windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Little Lily Rose Cross had arrived exactly on her due date, because even as a fetus, she'd apparently inherited her father's appreciation for punctuality and proper planning, and had immediately demonstrated that she possessed her namesake's extraordinary ability to orchestrate impossible things with seemingly effortless grace. The nursery was a masterpiece of careful design, soft pastels and natural textures, hand-painted murals depicting fairy tale scenes, a custom-built bookshelf already filled with classics and contemporary children's literature, and photographs documenting every stage of their impossible love story, from that first night of breaking and entering through their wedding day and beyond. Any success convincing our tiny CEO to accept sleep as a viable business strategy? Ethan asked softly from the doorway, still wearing his suit from another successful day at Cross Industries, where Madison now served as Chief Innovation Officer and resident expert in implementing impossible marketing campaigns that somehow consistently exceeded all projected outcomes. She's conducting feasibility studies on the concept, Madison whispered back, noting the way their daughter's dark eyes, so remarkably similar to Ethan's, seemed to be analyzing every detail of her environment with scientific precision. I think she inherited your tendency to overthink absolutely everything, including basic biological necessities. That's a terrifying prospect for our future sleep schedules. Ethan approached quietly, wrapping his arms around both his girls with the gentle expertise of someone who discovered that the most important negotiations happened at 2 a.m., with an audience of one very small, very determined person who had no interest in quarterly reports or market analysis. How was your day, besides managing our miniature dictator? Wonderfully productive. I finalized the community center project timeline and had lunch with my favorite consulting partner. The infamous Mr. Peterson from our accounting department? The devastatingly handsome Mr. Cross from the executive suite. Madison leaned back against his chest, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together after 5 years of marriage, 2 major corporate restructures, 3 apartment renovations, 4 vacations to places they'd never imagined visiting, and countless small adventures in impossibility. Who, incidentally, received some rather intriguing mail today. What kind of intriguing mail? Madison nodded toward the antique dresser, where a familiar-looking envelope waited with the patient stillness of something that contained important revelations. The kind that arrives with no return address and handwriting we recognize intimately. Ethan's breath caught audibly. Over the years, they'd received exactly 7 such letters, always at significant moments, always containing precisely the wisdom or encouragement they needed. Their wedding day. The first anniversary of Lily's death, when unexpected grief had overwhelmed them, despite their happiness. The day Madison had received her all-clear test results after a terrifying cancer scare that had tested their faith in miracles. The morning they'd brought baby Lily home from the hospital. Each letter had been perfect, timely, and impossible. Should we? Ethan began. After she's asleep, Madison said gently, understanding that this felt like a moment that deserved their complete attention and reverence. This feels like something meant for the whole family. 30 minutes later, with their daughter finally surrendered to dreams, they sat together on the antique love seat that had once belonged to Ethan's grandmother, the same grandmother whose protective bracelet had helped orchestrate their entire love story. Madison opened the envelope with the careful reverence they'd learned to apply to communications from beyond the usual boundaries of existence. Inside were two items, a letter and a small hand-drawn map that looked remarkably similar to the one that had led them to Central Park treasure hunting 5 years earlier. The letter was written in Lily's unmistakable script. "My dearest impossible family, your daughter is absolutely perfect. Your love story continues to be legendary, and your future stretches ahead brighter than every star in every sky that has ever existed. The map will guide you to one final gift, something I arranged long ago for the day when your family became complete in this first beautiful way. Thank you for proving that love stories can transcend every boundary that mortals think exists. Thank you for demonstrating that impossible things happen to people brave enough to believe in them consistently, daily, through ordinary moments and extraordinary challenges. Thank you for showing the world that the most beautiful mysteries are the ones we experience together with open hearts and unwavering faith. Your love has created ripples of miraculous beauty that have touched more lives than you'll ever know. Every time you choose kindness because you understand that love is real. Every risk you take because you know impossible things happen regularly. Every moment of hope you offer others because your love proved that destiny operates in mysterious but reliable ways. You're changing the world in ways that will echo through generations. Keep creating daily miracles. Keep believing in magic that manifests through ordinary devotion. Keep loving each other impossibly, extraordinarily, with the fierce tenderness that heals ancient wounds and creates new possibilities for everyone around you. Forever and always, in every dimension where love exists. Aunt Lily P.S. Check behind the loose brick in your garden wall tomorrow at sunset. Some gifts are worth waiting 5 years to discover. The map showed their current brownstone with remarkable accuracy, including architectural details and landscaping features that couldn't possibly have been known years ago, when Lily would have created it. It marked a specific location in their back garden with a small heart symbol and the words, "For when 3 becomes 4, becomes the beginning of forever." She knew, Madison said, studying the drawing with familiar amazement. She knew we'd buy this exact house, knew we'd have a daughter, knew precisely when we'd be ready for whatever she's hidden for us. She always knew everything that mattered, Ethan replied, his voice carrying the wonder of someone who'd spent 5 years experiencing regular miracles, but still felt amazed by each new impossibility. The question is, what could she possibly have hidden in our garden before we even owned this property? They discovered the answer the next evening, digging carefully behind the designated brick as their daughter watched from her bouncy seat on the patio, gurgling what sounded remarkably like approval at their archaeological efforts. Madison's fingers found something smooth and rectangular, wrapped in multiple layers of oilcloth, that had somehow remained perfectly preserved despite years of weather and seasonal changes. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Lily's meticulous handwriting, containing what appeared to be a comprehensive guide to their future, spanning the next decade, detailed descriptions of their wedding day written years before they'd met. Remarkably accurate sketches of their daughter that captured not just her physical features but her personality, predictions about their career developments, their moves, their challenges, their triumphs, and their continued growth as individuals and as a couple. But the final entry, dated December 14th, 2021, the day before Lily's death, was the most extraordinary revelation yet. I've spent months writing their story before they lived it, documenting a love that will unfold across years of beautiful impossibility. And now I understand something profound about the nature of destiny and free will. Love doesn't just transcend time and space and the boundaries of mortality. It actively creates new realities, new possibilities, new versions of the universe where miraculous things happen as naturally as sunrise. Madison and Ethan's love will create ripples of impossible beauty that will touch lives they'll never know about, inspire stories they'll never hear, encourage people they'll never meet to believe in their own capacity for extraordinary love. Their daughter will grow up believing that magic is as real as mathematics, because she'll witness it demonstrated daily in the way her parents choose each other, again and again, through ordinary moments and exceptional challenges. Little Lily will change the world not through grand gestures or public demonstrations, but because she'll understand from birth that impossible things are simply possibilities waiting for the right people to believe in them with sufficient conviction and love. She'll carry that knowledge into every relationship, every challenge, every moment when someone needs to be reminded that miracles happen to those who remain open to mystery. But their family won't stop with one child. Over the next decade, they'll welcome 2 more miracles. A son who will inherit his father's analytical mind but his mother's artistic soul, and another daughter who will arrive unexpectedly but perfectly, completing their family in ways they can't yet imagine. Each child will carry forward the legacy of impossible love, the understanding that some connections transcend every boundary we think exists. Madison will write a book about their love story, reluctantly at first, then with growing passion as she realizes that sharing their impossible journey offers hope to people who need to believe in destiny and second chances and love that conquers every obstacle. The book will become an unexpected bestseller, not because people want to read about romance, but because they desperately need proof that miraculous things still happen in an often difficult world. Ethan will leave the corporate world behind to start a foundation dedicated to helping other people believe in their own impossible dreams. Together, they'll create something beautiful that helps hundreds of people find the courage to take leaps of faith, to believe in love, to trust that the universe conspires in favor of those who choose hope over fear. This is my final gift to them, the knowledge that their love story was never just about them finding each other. It was about proving that miraculous things happen when people are brave enough to break down walls, literal and metaphorical, bold enough to believe in impossible things even when logic suggests otherwise, and generous enough to love without reservation or condition. Their love will conspiracy with the universe to bring magic to everyone it touches, creating a legacy of impossibility that will inspire generations of people to believe in destiny, to take risks for love, to trust that some connections are stronger than death itself. This is what forever really looks like, not just happily ever after for 2 people, but happily ever after in ways that make the entire world more beautiful, more hopeful, more willing to believe in magic. Watch for the signs. They'll come when you need them most. 10 years later, the legacy Madison Cross stood at the podium of the largest bookstore in Manhattan, looking out at a crowd of faces that seemed to glow with hope and anticipation. Her memoir, Breaking and Entering, a love story that defies every rule, had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 37 consecutive weeks. But more importantly, it had generated thousands of letters from readers who claimed the book had given them courage to believe in their own impossible love stories. "The question I'm asked most frequently," Madison said, her voice carrying clearly through the packed venue, "is whether I really believe that supernatural forces orchestrated my relationship with my husband. And my answer is always the same. I believe that love creates forces more powerful than anything science has yet discovered. I believe that when 2 people are meant to find each other, the universe will move mountains, sometimes literally, to make it happen." In the audience, Ethan sat with their 3 children, 10-year-old Lily Rose, who was already showing signs of inheriting her namesake's gift for orchestrating impossible situations, 7-year-old James, who approached everything with scientific curiosity but believed wholeheartedly in magic, and 3-year-old Hope, who had arrived exactly as Lily's journal had predicted, unexpectedly but perfectly, completing their family in ways they hadn't known they needed. Behind them sat Madison's parents, who had flown in from California, and Ethan's father, who had initially been skeptical of their whirlwind romance but now proudly told anyone who would listen that his son had found the kind of love that proves destiny is real. "But the most important lesson our story teaches," Madison continued, "isn't about supernatural intervention or impossible coincidences. It's about the choice to remain open to mystery, to say yes to adventures that don't make logical sense, To believe that love, real, transformative, soul-deep love, is always worth the risk. After the reading and signing, the Cross family walked home through Central Park, past the Bethesda fountain where everything had begun, past the Alice in Wonderland statue where they'd found buried treasure, past the bench where they'd shared their first real conversation about impossible things. "Mom," Lily Rose said, slipping her hand into Madison's. "Aunt Lily visited my dreams again last night." Madison and Ethan exchanged glances. Their eldest daughter had been having what she called visits from her namesake since she was old enough to speak in complete sentences. The conversations were always comforting, often helpful, and occasionally prophetic in ways that no longer surprised anyone in the Cross family. "What did she tell you this time?" Ethan asked, lifting Hope onto his shoulders while James ran ahead to climb on their favorite park sculpture. "She said she's proud of how our family turned out. She said the ripples are working exactly the way she hoped they would." Lily Rose paused thoughtfully. "She also said to tell you both that the next impossible thing is coming soon, and you should be ready to say yes." "What kind of impossible thing?" Madison asked. She wouldn't tell me exactly, but she was smiling really big, the way she does when she knows something wonderful is about to happen. As they reached the edge of the park, Madison's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it absently, then stopped walking so abruptly that Ethan nearly collided with her. "Madison? What is it?" She held up her phone with shaking hands. The message was from an unknown number, but the content was unmistakably familiar. "The foundation is just the beginning. Check your email when you get home. The next chapter of your impossible story is waiting. Time to help save someone else's love story." Uxo, Ethan stared at the screen, then looked around the park as though expecting to see his sister materialize among the evening joggers and families heading home. "After 10 years, she's still orchestrating impossible things," he said with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. "I wouldn't want it any other way," Madison replied, feeling that familiar flutter of excitement that came with knowing their adventure was far from over. They resumed walking toward home, hands intertwined, children chattering about homework and weekend plans, hearts open to whatever impossibility awaited them next. Behind them, though none of them noticed, the fountain's water caught the setting sun in patterns that looked almost like messages, almost like promises, almost like love made visible against the Manhattan sky. The impossible had become their specialty. The miraculous had become their daily bread. And love, beautiful, transformative, destiny-defying love, continued to prove that some stories never really end. They just begin new chapters, each one more extraordinary than the last. Epilogue. 25 years later, Madison and Ethan Cross stood in the garden of their country house in the Hudson Valley, watching their granddaughter play among the roses they'd planted to commemorate each year of their marriage. At 73 and 75, respectively, they moved with the careful grace of people who had lived fully, loved completely, and created a legacy that would ripple through generations. The Cross Family Foundation had helped orchestrate over 300 love stories that defied conventional logic. Madison's book had spawned the entire genre of impossible romance memoirs. Their children had grown up to be extraordinary adults who approached life with the absolute certainty that magic was real and love could conquer any obstacle. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, his arm around Madison's waist as they watched 5-year-old Lily Marie, named for both her great-aunt and her grandmother, chase butterflies with the same determination her family brought to everything they pursued. "Only that Lily couldn't be here to see all of this in person," Madison replied, though even as she spoke, she felt the familiar presence that had never truly left them. "Who says she can't?" Ethan smiled, pointing toward their granddaughter, who was now standing perfectly still among the roses, apparently having a serious conversation with someone only she could see. "Aunt Lily says to tell you both that this is just the beginning," the little girl called out suddenly. "She says love stories like yours don't ever really end. They just keep getting more beautiful." Madison and Ethan looked at each other, then at their granddaughter, then at the roses that seemed to glow with their own inner light in the afternoon sun. Some connections, they knew, truly were stronger than death. Some love stories really did transcend every boundary mortals thought immutable. And some people were lucky enough to spend their entire lives proving that impossible things happen daily to those brave enough to believe in them. As the sun set over their garden, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold and infinite possibility, Madison and Ethan Cross held each other close and gave silent thanks for a love that had defied every rule, conquered every obstacle, and created more beauty than they'd ever dared to dream possible. The impossible had become their forever, and forever, they knew, was just getting started. The end.